Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, where today we are discussing music as a business. In the olden days, parents would really discourage their children from playing music and just to concentrate on their education. But nowadays, things have changed. And I've invited Professor Fred Zindi, who went through those stages, who is a professor of education. But for today, I'm going to call you Fred, because we are discussing music and show business.
Absolutely fine.
Yes.
Good.
Music, you have been in it for a long time.
That's
Starting maybe in the 60s and 70s. I remember you writing from London about Zimbabwean musicians in the UK and coming here, playing music like Amai Weshava and so forth with your friends, Fungai Paul Malianga, and
right.
also appearing on Mvenge Mvenge with Hello Brothers, Hello Sisters, and also as a music promoter, bringing in some reggae musicians in the early years of independence, promoting Mapfumo and others, going to the UK, and being an activist, especially on the local media, to ensure that local music is played extensively more than foreign music. Once again, I welcome you.
Thank you very much.
Can music contribute to the gross domestic product of a country significantly?
Simply said, I'll say yes. But it's no secret that the music industry is filled with pitfalls. In fact, music, although I'm in it, is the sleaziest business I've seen in the world.
Explain yourself.
Well, there are many pitfalls. First of all, record companies are very reluctant to pay royalties to musicians. They make sure that they make as much profit as possible for themselves before they part with their money. And I can actually give you examples of
Or maybe we'll
situations.
come back to that. What are the other pitfalls? And then we'll deal with them one by one as we proceed. You've mentioned royalties.
There are many pitfalls. Piracy, for instance. You know, a lot of musicians don't make as much as they should, basically because they find it very difficult to collect all the royalties, especially the music that is being sold on the streets. There are many other pitfalls.
Okay. Which we'll be going into as we proceed with the program. Maybe let's start with piracy itself. How did it start? And how can society be discouraged from promoting piracy?
About piracy, this is what they do in Seychelles. They arrest not just the person who is selling the records, they also arrest the person who is buying. And that person who is buying is scared of buying because he knows he'll be imprisoned. And the fines are heavy. But here in this country, it's $50 fine.
50 US?
50 RTGS. And what's that? I know how artists suffer to spend time in the recording studios, paying band members, the people who actually contribute to session musicians and so forth. And at the end of the day, get nothing out of it. Our Zim dancehall artists, for instance, do that, a lot of that, but they seem to encourage it because they give their CDs free of charge. And fortunately, before COVID-19, they could perform at live concerts, and that was the way they would make their money after that publicity. But nowadays, it's difficult because they are not allowed crowds at concerts, so they don't make much money with live performances. And as a result of that, the record sales don't matter to them because they don't make money from them anyway. In the past, we used to have vinyl records. I don't know if these youngsters know about vinyl records. Those were 12-inch LPs where it took a lot of effort to manufacture them. But you don't pirate it because you don't know how to manufacture it. Today, it's just...
So at that time, the musicians at least could sustain themselves.
That's right. They could sustain themselves. And John Chibadura will tell you, I've sold 60,000 copies of my record. And he knows he's going to get some money from it. But these days, he sells 60,000 CDs. It's the person on the street corner who makes that kind of money, not him. That kind of thing. And today, it's so easy. Computer, make a CD from a computer. You can burn any CD and copy any music.
Is there no protection, or you as musicians and promoters and so forth, are you not encouraging some innovation so that there is this protection, so that at least you can contribute to the GDP? I was asking.
That's right. If the law enforcement, the neighboring rights, and the Copyright Act were in place and were effectively administered, these problems wouldn't exist.
But how about royalties? Are the stations now paying since the time you were making lots of noise?
It depends on what kind of royalties they are. In today's age, we have streaming, for instance. If I'm playing my record on ZBC or any other radio station and it's streamed to people in Australia and they listen to it, the chances of me getting royalties for that airplay are very slim, unless Zimura, which is a royalty collection agency in Zimbabwe, actually pursues those people. And they're hard to pursue.
Okay.
We have an understanding with PRS, for instance, Performance Rights Society, where if a record is played and they have got knowledge of it, they take out the percentage of royalties and send them to Zimura,
okay,
which
Fred,
distributes them.
I'll stop you for a while. Very interesting discussion. And when we come back in the second segment, we'll be looking at other issues that affect music as a business. And we'll try to see how progression can be made so that at the end of the day, music does contribute to the gross domestic product of the country. So join us again in the second segment of Economic Forum. Welcome to the second segment of Economic Forum, a program where we discuss issues to do with our economy. And today, interestingly, we are discussing music as a business and how it can contribute to our gross domestic product. And my guest here, Fred Zindi, a musician himself and a promoter, says it can be done, but there are several impediments that he has just mentioned, like piracy, as well as non-payment of royalties and others. But at the end of the day, we are looking at positive ways of making sure that those things are fought so that our musicians can benefit. And Fred, am I right to say society has got a role to play?
Society has got a role to play. The politicians have got a role to play. In the 1980s, just after independence, we used to have festivals in Rufaro Stadium. And people came from all over the world to watch Zimbabwean musicians perform. The Thomas Mapfumos, the Oliver Mtukudzis, and so forth. And it was a big thing. The tourists didn't just spend at the festival. They went around the country, Victoria Falls, Nyanga, and they would spend lots of money. And that was a big contribution to the Zimbabwean GDP.
Then the other thing is, we were talking earlier on about piracy. And we have just discovered that musicians themselves are actually happy to be promoting these albums of theirs on different platforms like YouTube, because the more they are visited, it means that they get some income, so they are monetizing. So maybe we are not talking about piracy in the old sense, but we're now looking at it differently. And maybe the musicians themselves, Fred, are now ahead. They've seen that they cannot just be fighting people, but they can actually use piracy in order to promote themselves. I don't know what your view is there.
Yes, there are platforms, international platforms like YouTube, as you mentioned, and Spotify and so forth, where the number of views, people who view that music love to be credited, and because it helps in their advertising. So if, for instance, a Zimbabwean musician has got 1 million views, Spotify will pay a percentage of the amount of royalties that are due to that musician. So some people have just decided they'll use that platform instead of fighting piracy, and because of that, they're making a lot of money. I know one artist who was making about $6,000 every month because he had scored over 3-4 million views on YouTube.
Is there a way of unionizing all this? Are they happy with what they're given by YouTube, or at times it's something that has to be looked into and see whether there is fairness in the whole process? Like what you do here, you mentioned Zimura and the Zimbabwe Music Rights Association and others.
There is need to do that, to unionize it, because as we know, we always have the popular musicians benefiting. If you are not as popular as, for instance, Jah Praiser, the chances are you won't be recognized by anybody, not even by YouTube, and you'll still remain a pauper, you remain suffering. But a lot of people, especially in the Zim dance hall arena, you find that a lot of them will just try and score a hit in order to get from YouTube. They don't care about who is selling at the street corner their CDs and so forth. A young lad like Enzo Aishal, for instance, didn't even know his fortune was coming until he had the hits made, and people liked it in Bare, and it expanded internationally, and so forth. And they're getting payments.
Is it the best way to go?
It's one way to go, but it's not the best way to go.
You know. And it's always good to have innovation in some of these things.
That's
then
right.
What happens to the ordinary, those who are not known? Because again, another example that you have to unpack is that during COVID, there were these virtual shows. And what we saw was a tendency to invite the popular ones again. Those who are upstarts, who are coming up, we're not seeing much of them. Of course, a few were coming up, but how can they also be assisted on some of these platforms? Some may not even have phones, just even to watch their music.
It's always difficult for an upcoming artist. It's not easy, But once they get like a free virtual show, for instance, and they show whatever they're capable of doing, the chances are they'll probably get popular, and that way they'll also benefit. But with the majority of artists, especially those who are just playing in pubs and performing and not recording anything, the suffering continues.
Mm-hmm. But you as promoters, are you working well with the media in order to be adequately promoted? Because they have to be identified and they have to be brought into the fold.
This is it. John, you know me from way back after independence. Me and my friend Tendai Mfuruza used to come to ZBC to harass and hassle DJs and say, we want to be known. We want our music played. And I remember John Matinde coming to my house to say, look, you always say you want your music played. Give us the music.
Okay.
And that's how I got played.
And this is what promoted ultimately what we're now talking about.
This is it.
To be local content. And it has even gone to 75% local content. And you were telling me earlier on when we had our discussion that in other countries it goes up to about 90%.
In Tanzania, it's 90% local music and 10% foreign. And that idea caught one Minister of Information, and he decided we'll try it for Zimbabwe. And I think it was 75% local content and 25% foreign.
And it's working?
It is working. That's how most of young artists have managed to make a living out of that.
The other assistance that musicians would need, especially when they're going to be performing to international standards, because we want to be recognized locally as well as internationally, is the equipment. And I know you were also part of that, trying to negotiate how equipment can be brought in at much lower costs so that they could afford both for recording as well as for public performance. But we'll come back to that. I've already asked you the question,
Okay.
and when we come back, we are going to be talking about the contribution of equipment. Join us again in the third and final segment, where today we are talking to Fred Zindi, himself a musician, a music promoter, and an activist here on Economic Forum. Welcome to the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing music as a business, and we've invited Fred Zindi, himself a musician as well as a music promoter and artist, who is sharing with us his thoughts about how music can contribute significantly to our economy. And we were now discussing the issue of assisting musicians in bringing in what they use, especially equipment.
Yes, I would like to credit myself for having fought that battle, because I had equipment based in the UK and just didn't know how to bring it because customs duty was too heavy, more than the cost of the equipment itself. So we went to the late deputy vice president of the country, Comrade Simon Muzenda, and we spoke to him and he said, could you please assist? And he phoned up Mr. Munyaradze or Dr. Munyaradze at the time and said, can you give them a letter and issue out a letter which releases that equipment with immediate effect? And after that, it was easy for other musicians who came into the country who went out of the country to buy equipment and brought it in, because customs duty was waived.
So it did help the musicians.
It helped the musicians a lot.
Yeah. How about issues of copyright?
Yes.
Someone sings your song, becomes more popular than you in that music. Is it something that you've also looked at? Because while you're sitting there, you're on your phone, you find one of your compositions is trending, all over the world, and you've made nothing out of it.
That's right. What they should do is, if they copy somebody else's song, is just give them credit. There's some youngsters who used to come to me and say, I'm trying to do Oliver Mtukuzi's song, but do you think Oliver will allow me? And they say, you don't even have to ask him. Just record it. If it becomes popular, just credit that this is a song by Oliver Mtukuzi, because Zimura, when they collect the royalties,
he also benefits.
They don't send them to you, they send them to Oliver Mtukuzi.
Yes.
And you'll just get what are called mechanical rights, just for the number of sales you have made. I was very pleased in the early 1980s when the Harare Mambo Band played the song that you sang, Hello Brothers, Hello Sisters.
Yes.
They used to sing it at weddings and so forth.
And you were credited?
I wasn't credited as such,
Okay.
But I was just pleased to know that somebody else is copying my music.
Yes.
And I was pleased about that. They didn't record it, but they would perform it live. And they should collect royalties for live performances. For instance, if Jah Praiser plays his own compositions, Zimura should still go to him and collect performance rights from him, and then give that money back to him. It doesn't make sense, but give that money back to him for this number of songs he performs. That kind of thing. That's how it should be done.
How are these things administered now in order to be effective? In the olden days, there were music sheets, which then went to Zimura and calculations were made. That's the time you were complaining a lot that most of these music sheets were mainly dominated by music from abroad. But nowadays, this is done digitally. Is it working out well? Is it effective?
It's digitally done now, and it's more effective because it's just a question of printing whatever is played during a radio show. I've been a DJ myself, so I know what happens. But sometimes I play some other people's music which is not recorded on the computer.
Yeah, but this time it's difficult.
It's difficult. In the past, we actually used to sit by the radio, pay somebody to sit by the radio to listen if my record has been played, and then send a signal straight away to Zimura and say, listen, my record was played on such a day, such time by this radio station. I need royalties for that. And we just used to make a lot of fuss about it. But these days, they just send a list from the performance. A DJ is supposed to actually compile their list of performance songs before they even go on air. But sometimes they don't do that. That's where the loophole is.
Okay. Now, let's go on to the management of music, because for musicians to succeed and also for government to be able to collect some monies and also, make sure that it contributes to GDP, which I have been referring to over and above other factors like tourism and so forth. Management. How are musicians managed? Are you happy? I know you managed 1 or 2 bands, including the Frontline Kids. What we've heard is that managers actually get richer than the musicians. Is that the case? Very briefly?
Not in my case.
Okay.
With the Frontline Kids, we used to have a guy called Philbert Maroa.
Yeah.
He's still performing. He used to handle all the cash. I never touched it. And 10% was due to the manager. Like if we have a concert tonight, let's say we're playing for a wedding and we get $1,000. 10% is $100. It will come straight to me without me even having attended that show. That was the arrangement we had. If things are properly managed, they'll work out. If the government properly manages the music industry, they'll benefit a lot. Income tax from the record companies and so forth. But there are a lot of now backyard studios. They won't know who is doing what because it's not properly managed. It's not properly organized.
Is there a way of actually organizing capacitation of these musicians, including the managers, so that at the end of the day they benefit? I see it also happens in soccer, where stars are managed by other people. But these stars, these legends, when we see them, or when they die, they are paupers. You look at where they live. Each time when they show a funeral of a legend, I want to see their house, want to see their property and so forth, and we find that they are paupers. How can that be addressed, coming from management?
It's, as you say, if the management is properly done and is professional, there's success. But unfortunately, in the music industry, as I said, the music industry is the sleaziest I've seen in this world. Unfortunately, in the music industry, it's just cutthroat business. I get my share, and it's got to be larger than the next person's share. And that's the way things are going, and that's the way things have gone in the past. I even know popular artists, their band members are always complaining.
That they are collecting all the money.
That's right. And the main artist will tell you, if you're not happy, go elsewhere. Go and find somewhere else where you can do this kind of thing. And it's not proper.
Okay. Fred, thank you very much for sharing your insights, sharing your thoughts, as well as your experience in the music industry as a musician, music promoter, an artist, and above all, as an educationist. Thank you very much for coming on to Economic Forum. Today we had Fred Zindi, who was talking about music and how it can contribute to the economy of Zimbabwe. And until next time, this is John Masogo.